Welcome to Inspire's online book club for this month. I'm Jess, I'm your host, and I'm joined today by Terry and Ian. For June, we've been reading Lampedusa by Stephen Price, which I have a copy of here, which tells the real-life story of Giuseppe Tomasi de Lampedusa, the last prince of Lampedusa, as he struggles to complete his novel, The Leopard, before his death. So first, I'd like to ask you your initial thoughts, what were you thinking going into it, and have you enjoyed reading it? Do you want to start, Ian?
Yeah, I knew nothing about it, and I hadn't read anything about it, and I didn't really figure out till quite late on that it was based on a real person. I found that quite intriguing, really. I really enjoyed it. Bit of a slow start, but once I got into it and sort of got the feeling for the characters, I found it a really nicely written and interesting and enjoyable read. So yeah, loved it.
Okay, Terry?
No, not as much as yourself, Ian. I found it quite laborious. I think there was just so much almost doom and gloom, but I did finish it, and there were aspects of it which, were very positive, but not my favourite book.
I think I'm somewhere in between. I did enjoy it, and I felt like the writing was very well written, but there were times when it was a bit of a struggle to get through parts of it, and you really had to be in the right frame of mind to read it. It wasn't just a book to pick up and read a few pages of and then put down. You kind of had to put some time to it, which is a bit tricky sometimes. So had any of us heard of The Leopard before as a novel?
No, knew nothing about. I mean, I thought it was going to be about the island of Lampedusa. So then I figured out that this guy was actually the Count of Lampedusa or whatever. So I just went to it totally blind, and I just thought at first it was just a fictional piece, and it is a fictionalized life of him, isn't it? It's not what you call a biography, no, I just treated it as a work of fiction, and that's, I enjoyed it on that basis, really.
And so I hadn't heard of The Leopard, but I've sort of had a quick Google and had a look, and sort of I've been intrigued in looking into it. I'm not sure I want to read it particularly, but just sort of maybe seeing what it's about in a way. Anything to say on that, Terry?
Well, I did wonder when I was 3/4 of the way through whether I would have enjoyed it more if I had read The Leopard either previously or in parallel with the book.
I do wonder if there's anything that you might see more in this book because you've read it, sort of thing, if the characters or anything, because obviously what I've read, I think parts of The Leopard is based on his family and him, but it's a fictionalized version as well. So I wonder if there's any parallels going off that way, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I did, when I was doing a little bit of research, see someone in a review, I think on Goodreads, say that this book is written in a somewhat similar style, so that would be an interesting sort of comparison, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it is quite a famous book, isn't it, in sort of Italian literary circles. So, I don't feel a great urge to read it, I must say.
I suppose if it's been written in the 50s, it's probably in an old-fashioned style to us now to read and go back to.
Yeah.
So I think look at the writing style of Lampedusa in the book. It's obviously very descriptive, and I personally felt like I really could feel like I was in Italy in the 1950s and the sort of way that it felt. Do you want to make any comments, Terry?
I think the imagery was superb, and the presentation of the devastation of the buildings because of the bombing and so on. For me, the descriptions there mirrored the inner turmoil of Tomasi, and his fear, and he cannot do anything about it. So as far as the writing style is concerned, as I said, I think very cleverly done in that the projections of our protagonist were echoed in his surroundings and all of his losses.
Yeah, Ian?
Yeah, I agree with Terry. I think that was quite nicely framed in that you've got, obviously, this was a sort of a decline anyway of this sort of royal type of person, and it was exacerbated by the American bombing. So their palace is sort of lying in ruins, and there's this whole atmosphere of decline and decay. His health is failing, and I was quite sort of immersed in that, and and then you've got the introduction of the younger characters who sort of introduced an element of sort of hope for the future, and a bit more of an optimistic development, I just felt that the way that the surroundings mirrored the mood of the story was really well done and really well created.
The falling apart buildings and everything sort of are like a metaphor for how they feel as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is really quite perfect in that the buildings, the real life buildings, were like that. So they were falling apart, they were bombed. So created a really nice sort of imagery in that way.
Yeah. And I hadn't realised, I don't know a lot about the sort of Second World War invasion of Italy, and I didn't realise how extensively damaged Sicily was by the American bombing, and that in a way, with what's going on in Ukraine, sort of had more impact somehow. The fact that even after all this time, they haven't managed to rebuild it, and it sort of made it sort of more poignant somehow with what's happening in Ukraine as well.
Like how long it takes to recover.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got a note here. What do we think about the lack of speech marks, though?
No problem. No problem for me. I'm getting used to that now.
Sometimes I'm all right with it, but in this I just found it a little bit more confusing, like who was talking. I felt in this, because it is a more old-fashioned piece of writing, it needed the speech marks to sort of echo like an older book sort of thing. But
yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah, but I've read so many books recently with no speech marks. I'm kind of used to it now.
Yeah.
It infuriates me.
I don't mind, like I've read all the Sally Rooney books. They don't have speech marks in, and I quite like that, because a lot of that is lots of speech. But in this way, it's just like, oh no, someone's talking. Okay, right.
Yeah.
I've got on here, I wrote down here, there's like a theme of like what could have been sort of going off in the book, I feel. He only starts writing as he gets a diagnosis for emphysema, so he's sort of writing his novel in his dying days, and that in his early adulthood, when he was finding himself, he was in a very changing sort of period of time with like the class in Italy and sort of the way that nobility was sort of thing. We got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I sort of related to that. It's the whole idea of the sort of poverty in southern Italy, and the fact that there wasn't much hope there for any sort of change. Everybody seemed to be resigned to this sort of static economy and no sort of real hope for the future. I thought that came across very powerfully.
And I think that some of Tomas's despair is purely because he knows that he cannot change anything. You know, the loss of his status and so on, and he's powerless, just as he's powerless to control his tragic diagnosis.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Obviously, he enjoyed literacy and literature. Sort of, he putting together the lectures for the young people. He obviously had a, you know, he was very intelligent and could, you know, understand a lot. But why didn't he decide to write until it was the last chance, sort of thing? It's sort of a lot of what could have been, isn't it, in that sort of thing?
Yeah, yeah.
I think when diagnosed with a terminal illness, that there's almost an incredibly powerful impetus to leave something behind, you know, one's legacy. And I think the decline in his health was what really spurred him on, as well as the support of the younger characters as well. I felt that they brought great fun.
Yeah.
You know, they enabled Tomasi to almost feel much younger than he was and much healthier than he was. And I think they also provided a nice balance between the melancholic portrayal of both Tomasi and the situation. And yeah, they did, as you said earlier, Ian, you know, they created a huge sense of hope for themselves, but also I think for Tomasi, of whom they were very fond, weren't they?
Mm. And the whole thing about adopting, I can't remember the character's name because it's over a month since I've read it, but that whole thing of that the family allowing him to adopt that now adult son, as it were,
yeah,
so that they could pass on the title. And I thought that was really sweet. Bit weird, but really, really sweet that the family allowed this, enabled this to happen, so that the title wouldn't die with him. And it was quite a lot of time was spent on that, and I thought that was. I got quite engaged with it, with them visiting the family and getting permission, and the descriptions of the rooms and the detail that he goes into describing the rooms and the furniture and everything. I really liked all that detail.
I liked that the party to celebrate them adopting the son was in a nice modern building, so it's sort of showing the future there as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Going forwards. I made a note here, sort of like that in writing his novel, he's left a legacy, hasn't he? He's created something that lives on after his death, so that it's there. Because it was, and as I said, that part of the novel, The Leopard, is based on his experiences, and he's put part of them in it in a fictionalized way. So he has left himself there.
Yeah, and sad that he didn't know for certain it would get published before he died. That must be quite tough when you put all that work, put so much work and time and effort into it, and travelled at great sort of personal expense when he wasn't well to try and visit publishers to get them to take it, and getting rejected several times. It's really sad that he probably didn't think it was ever going to get published, and it's a shame that he couldn't have had some kind of sign that maybe somebody was interested in it before he died.
Yeah, I think not knowing, sort of, he, you know, it makes it more melancholy in some ways, doesn't it? Because he's sort of like, he's not seen the fruits of his labour there. It's
yeah.
Sort of, he's got rejections instead.
Yeah.
Yes. Have we got any further thoughts? Anything else we'd like to input?
just like the whole sort of Italy, the sort of the whole picture of Italy which he created. Oddly enough, I just read Elena Ferrante's The Lost Daughter immediately before reading this, and it was like quite a smooth transition into another Italian novel. And it again, you know, her, obviously we're straying off the point here a bit, but her descriptions of the resort and the characters were quite similar in a way, and it sort of it was a smooth transition into Lampedusa, and it was quite nice to stay in Italy for another few days while I was reading that.
I feel obviously I don't want to visit Italy in the 1950s when it's all a bit run down, but like reading about like little cafes and sort of the squares and everything, I'm like, oh, I'd quite happily go back to Italy now.
Yeah.
So. So if we, I don't know, if we've got anything else that we want to add, or should we give some marks?
Yes.
So Terry, do you want to give us your marks out of 5 this month?
Do you know, I hadn't really thought about marks. 3.
3, Ian?
Yeah, I'd give it a 4. I mean, I agree with Terry. There were times when it was quite hard going, and you know, certainly the first 50 pages I was beginning to wonder if I would finish it, so I can't give it a 5, but for the things that I've said, I think it deserves a 4, really. Yeah,
I think I'll go for a 4. And so yeah, there's parts of it where it was a bit hard to get through, and just sort of like, oh, I don't want to read that right now, but once I sort of got my head into it, yeah, I've really enjoyed reading it. So.
Good.
Right, thank you.
Okay.